the responsibility over unaccompanied children. So I had a very strong interest in that, and of course, as a member of the Doctors Caucus, we have a strong interest in seeing what's going on with the COVID virus and what what they were doing. And boy, were our eyes ever opened. I mean, we went to the first facility we went to was the Brownsville Customs and Border Patrol facility, which is a smaller facility. And in Brownsville, they had 21 of the 28 children. Of the 28 unaccompanied children, 21 of them were in isolation with either COVID, smallpox, or chickenpox, or flu, or some type of problem. They were in isolation. 21 out of the 28 that they had there. And again, Brownsville is a very small facility. But
what kind of ages? What ages are we talking about, buddy?
Well, that's a good question. I'm glad you asked that because they consider it to be 18 or under 18, 17 and under, I guess you would say. Here's the problem that we ran into is that they are now finding a lot of older kids coming in claiming their age to be 17 and under. And they're finding out that, no, they're 21 and 22. So that's a big problem they're running into down at the border is them trying to cross the border saying that they're 17 or younger, and in reality they're not. They're 21, 22, or whatever.
So, like you said, they're isolated. So, what else did you see? What kind of help, are they being fed? They're trying to find their parents? What else taking place? I mean, you see these stories on the news. They're just coming in droves. How's the process work? What did you see?
Well, first of all, let's set the stage. I mean, last month you had 172,000 people come across that border, and of those 172,000, 19,000 of them were children, 17 or younger, supposedly. And when they're coming across the border, of course, they just come across the border. In fact, we went to one staging area, if you will. It was a temporary processing center that they had set up under a bridge. And I've actually been there before. This is my second visit to that particular site. And at that site, people just flowing in. I mean, just walking in. They get across the river and they come to that site. They process them there. They do their initial processing there, and then they take them to the processing center. The Customs and Border Patrol has the responsibility of the processing center. So they take them on buses, vans, whatever, to the processing center. Now, by law, they are supposed to stay at the processing center for only 72 hours. That's just about 3 days. So essentially what's happening is that the average stay now is 5.5 days because they have so many. We visited the site in Donna, Texas, the processing center. And hear me loudly and clearly on this. That facility has a capacity of 250. When we went there that day, last Friday, they had 3,500 people at that facility. A capacity of 250, they had 3,500 on that day at that facility. Of that 3,500, 2,600 of them were children. Unbelievable. They were literally stacked on top of each other. They have what they call pods, and that's different sections of where they put they try to separate males from females and they try to separate the ages as best as they can as well. Those pods have a capacity of 33. On Friday, they had 393 in each pod.
Do their parents
they were on top of each other.
Do their parents just send them across the border? Where
They do. They do, Bob. What happens is, Butch, they do. They give them to the coyotes. They pay the coyotes to bring them across, and then they get across. Now, some of them come with their parents, but not many of them come with their parents. But they're unaccompanied children. They have no one. Now, they have the information of who they're supposed to be contacting here in America. And that's what the processing center has, that responsibility of trying to hook them up with that person, get them in touch with whoever it is, an aunt, uncle, or mother or father that might already be over here trying to get the child over here. And, supposedly that's who it is. We have no idea of verifying. whether that's true or not, but that's the way the process works. It is just unbelievable. And then everything else on top of that, when I say everything else on top of that, this is obviously a humanitarian crisis. I mean, when you have these people who are, first of all, risking their lives to get up here, because what they're going through is just horrible. The travel and everything that they're having to experience to get to the border is horrible. And then and also we're hearing about they're being sexually abused. There's child abuse. All these things that are happening with the coyotes down there. So what happens is that you got this influx of people here. All these people coming across this border, and the processing centers that again are run by Customs and Border Patrol, whose responsibility is to guard the border, whose responsibility is to be the ones that are protecting our border. They are having to be in the processing center, so they have actually taken of their officers, they've had to take a lot of them and put them inside, and therefore that means that we don't have as many of the CBP agents on the border. We were told in one stretch of a 23-mile stretch, they usually have 15 to 20 agents that are monitoring that stretch, that now they're down to 3. There's no way 3 agents can monitor 23 miles. Not realistically, and certainly not in a good way. But the point is what's happening is they'll flood the border, and then the cartels will send drugs across in the other areas. So the Customs and Border Patrol agents, they're concentrating on the people, on the children, and on the illegal immigrants who are coming across, and the cartels are simply sending drugs through on the other side. So not only do we have a humanitarian crisis here, but we also have a national security crisis here. And it would be easy for all of us to just sit back and think, okay, what's happening at the border, because we're over here in Savannah or because you're in the north or wherever, that's just impacting the border. That's not going to impact me. Wrong. Those drugs are coming to your community. In fact, here in the state of Georgia, last week, we had incidents of fentanyl overdoses here in the state of Georgia. There is enough fentanyl coming across that border, the southwest border. There's enough fentanyl coming across that border to kill every American several times over. So we've got a disaster at the border.
And just joining us first is Colonel Buddy Carter on the phone with us. Again, he was at the border this weekend. So what do you think should be done, buddy? What's the solution? Got a solution?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Well, one other thing one thing is that we need to finish the wall. We went to Mission, Texas, which is very close to McAllen, where we were at. We went to a community. It was the name of it was the Chimney Park. We went to this community where they had started the wall. That wall was supposed to be 110 miles. That's how much was approved. 21 miles were finished, and they stopped construction on it. We literally looked at equipment and all the supplies that you needed to build that wall were just sitting there rusting and just going to waste. And the wall was halfway completed. Not even halfway completed. And not only was that wall supposed to be protecting the border, but it was also serving a dual purpose in that it was halfway up. It was a solid wall, and it was supposed to protect the area from flooding as well. So it was serving a dual purpose, but they just stopped after 21 miles, whereas 110 miles were approved. First thing we need to do is finish that wall.
When these people come across the border there, are they stepping onto private property, or are they just going down roads owned by the states or the United States? I mean, if you own property along the Mexican border, do you have to put up with just immigrants just coming on your property left, right, forwards, and backwards?
Absolutely. On one of my previous trips, we went to Arizona, which is, very rugged terrain and mountainous, and it's very different from Texas, where you have the Rio Grande. It's a narrow, winding river and shallow in some parts that you can just walk across. But in Arizona, those ranchers, they've got big problems. and I can only imagine the pressure that's put on them by cartels. I mean, you know, if you were to turn someone in, I could imagine that those cartels, they're ruthless. We all know that. But it's horrible.
But
we need the wall.
Speaking of the wall, clarify for me, because I've heard conflicting reports. I've heard that they're still building the wall, even though Biden said stop the wall. Is any construction at all going on the wall, or is that totally stopped at all?
Not that I saw. I don't know that there may be some in other areas, but I can tell you that where we went, as I mentioned, the Mission in the Chimney Park area community, they had stopped it, and it was just like it was ridiculous. I mean, you had rebar coming up in one area that you just walk through, and then you had a solid wall for a mile, and then you'd have an open area, and then you'd have a solid wall and an open area. Well, you know, what good does that do at all? But another thing, Bob, if I could, another thing we need to do is to enact or to put back into place some of the orders that were in place during the Trump administration, including the Stay in Mexico order, and that is to let Mexico know that you need to stay in there. And we were actually taking tariffs and imposing tariffs on them when they weren't helping us to keep the people from coming to the border. Whereas now you have the Biden administration has made it perfectly clear, our borders are open, y'all come on. And then you just walk across the border. And that's what they're doing now.
Why does the administration let this crisis happen? I mean, they're just thinking about future votes? I mean, it's a humanitarian disaster down there. You got drugs coming across. You got kids coming across. You know, you don't know where they're going. For us taxpayers, we have to pay for everything that they do, from eating to sleeping to where they're staying and all that kind of stuff. Why does the administration just turn its back on the federal laws that protect Americans from this kind of situation?
I have no idea. That is a great question, Butch, and it's a question that this administration needs to answer. Why is it that Joe Biden, why is it that Kamala Harris have not been to the border? They haven't. It was, 19 days ago that the president put Kamala Harris in charge of this, and she's still not been down to the border? And what has she done? She's still not even had a press conference to address the situation that exists down there. I have no idea, and I don't think they have any idea what they're doing, to be quite honest with you. This is overwhelming.
So she hasn't even been to the border, is that correct?
No, she has not. She has not been to the border.
But she's been put in charge. You know, like a lot of people said he just passed the buck to the vice president, but like I said, she hasn't even been down there. So, are there any meetings set up at all? I mean, have you heard anything in Washington? Are they going to have any like committees or any, you know, to address it? Or I mean, what are they just going to let it happen, or what's the plan?
Well, there does not seem to be a plan. The border czar, Roberta Jacobson, resigned last week. It was expected that she would stay through the end of the month, but she resigned abruptly last week. So now we don't even have a border czar, and we don't know what's going to happen with that, who's going to take that over. But I can tell you, Bob, it's hard to describe this. It's hard to articulate what's going on down there. And I mean, it's not even day by day, it's hour by hour. Every hour that we don't do something, it gets worse and worse and worse.
Shouldn't there be more? Shouldn't there be more video on news about all this and all the newscasts throughout the country showing what the crisis situation is along the border? I mean, this is a crisis situation.
There's no question about it, and of course, it's being reported and it's being asserted that the Biden administration is suppressing the media from seeing those and putting pressure on them not to show those pictures and not to report that. And of course, you know, can you imagine if the Republicans had done that? I mean, that would have been the worst thing that could ever happen. But Democrats are doing it, and supposedly it's not anything wrong with it. But I can tell you, it is so bad down there; it's hard to describe it. And
I've mentioned to you. I'm sorry. I mentioned too at the beginning of the when you first started, there was the fact that there's federal laws on the book right now that protect Americans from this kind of situation that were passed years and years ago, that each administration should enforce because they are our laws. Is there any way that a group of concerned citizens could help the situation in terms of stopping this crisis situation by closing up the border, by bringing a case in front of the Supreme Court who says, yes, you've got to enforce these federal laws? Or is that just something that you don't think would ever happen?
I would hope it would happen, and certainly and that's what it's going to take, something along those lines. It's going to have to be the people of this country saying, look, we're just not going to tolerate this. This is, it's a perfect example of elections have consequences, and policies have consequences. And doing away with the Trump-era policies has resulted in this. And enacting the policies that the Biden administration has enacted here by executive order is resulting in this. And there's so many of these kids coming across that are testing COVID positive, and they're just releasing them. It's unbelievable. Now, I guess it's been a couple of months ago that I went to Costa Rica and I went fishing. Before I could come back into this country, I had to pay $150 and get a COVID test and prove that I was negative before I could come back into this country. I should have just gone to the border and walked across, and I could have saved myself $150.
Well, you're not a potential future vote for the other side, so it didn't matter.
And I'm just being facetious about the $150, but still, if you're an American citizen, if you're out in this country, if you're coming back in this country, you got to get a COVID test and you got to prove negative. But if you come across the border, you test positive, they still release you.
Buddy, how do they keep those Border Patrol people employed? I mean, why do they just? I mean, how do they deal with all that? I mean, have you talked to any of those agents, or they got to be frustrated as all get out. I'm surprised they even stay doing their job. Why don't they just walk off and say enough's enough? Can't handle it.
Great question. And let me mention to you that we met with leadership, and they told us that one of their biggest problems right now that they've had so many people who are retiring and leaving, and those guys and gals are doing such a great job. I mean, they are not trained as social workers, but essentially that's what they're doing in the processing center. And I just have to tip my hat to them and thank them for the wonderful job that they're doing. They're discouraged. They said they've never seen anything like it since they've been there. They've never seen anything like what's going on. And one of the questions that we kept asking that we never really got an answer to was why so many kids now? Before, it was illegal, but it wasn't this many kids. What has caused the influx of kids? And nobody really had an answer for that. We don't really know.
And besides the contact information in the United States, do they have anything? I mean, are they just walking across with just the clothes on their back? Do they have anything? Do they bring any? I mean, what are you seeing when they walk across? Do they have anything at all? Any material possessions at all?
The coyotes train them.
Now, tell us what coyotes are.
Coyotes are the ones that are being paid to bring them across the border. Okay. All right. They are the ones that the families pay to bring them across the border. And, oh, by the way, you do not cross that border unless you pay the coyotes. And if you try to cross that border without paying one of those coyotes, there'll be consequences.
Are you telling me that the coyotes have better security along our border than we do here in the United States?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Maybe we ought to start paying them a lot of money to keep them out, since they have better security.
It is. It is almost to the point of being comical. I mean, we are, and I didn't witness it myself, but I understand that some of the other Codels that have been down there in the last few weeks, particularly one senatorial Codel, that some of the Mexicans some of the coyotes on the other side were actually laughing and taunting them. Across the river, they were actually taunting the senators.
That's amazing right there. Absolutely amazing. We're being made a fool of in the country and throughout the world because of our situation on the border, from things that I've said, that I've seen and read, that the world's kind of laughing at us because of our crisis along the border, because we're allowing it.
It is unbelievable, and as I say, it's not a day-to-day thing, it's an hour-to-hour thing. I mean, it's unbelievable to just sit there or just stand there and watch these people come across and just, I mean, in droves they're coming across.
So, buddy, were you able to take pictures, a video, things like that? Are you able to bring that back? Or, you know,
oh, yeah. I've got some.
So what do you do with that information? Do you just continue to have press conferences and try to shed light on it, or is there any way to get any Democrats' attention, or how does this work?
Well, we actually have gotten some Democrats' attention. Henry Cuellar, a good friend of mine who represents a Democrat who represents part of the border down in Texas, and there are a couple of other Democratic representatives who from Texas who are working in a bipartisan fashion to bring this to light. And we, of course, are posting on social media as much as we can, trying to, I was on Fox this morning, Fox Business this morning, telling him about my visit. We're trying to raise the awareness as much as we can.
Somebody just texted in, said the reason why that this is being allowed by the administration, that the illegals are potential Democratic voters. Somebody just texted that in. That's the reason why it's being allowed.
Well, that has been asserted, yes.
All right, Bob?
No, I think they covered it pretty well. Like I said, hopefully, they can continue to shed light. I'm like you. I'm amazed that the media is not pushing harder to get access down there. I saw the one press conference where they asked them why they couldn't get in. They said they're going to let them in after certain things are implemented, but I don't know when that's going to take place. But I'm like you. If that was the Trump administration telling the media they couldn't get in there, there'd be riots in the streets. So, it's kind of crazy. But like I said, he's the president who's going to bring everybody together, unify. It's April. He's been there 4 months. I don't see much unification taking place. So we'll see how it plays out.
I have to tell you this. Excuse me, Bob. I have to tell you that this is the fourth time I've been down to the border in the last 6 years, in the last 7 years, I should say, and it's as bad as I've ever seen it. I've seen it before and thought it was bad. It was nothing compared to this time. I mean, these people were literally on top of each other. I mean, I don't know how a facility with a capacity, or built for a capacity of 250, can get 3,500 people in.
Where do they go when they're released? Where are these thousands of people going every day when they're released? Okay,
here's the thing, okay? When they're caught by Customs and Border Patrol. That's who catches them, or who they turn themselves into. In most cases, that's what they do. They just walk up and say, "I'm here. Take me." And they go to the Customs and Border Patrol. That's the ones I was telling you about. By law, they are supposed to only keep them for 72 hours, but they, on average, are keeping them for 130 hours. And we had one little girl who had been there for 28 days in the processing center, and there were 10 of them that had been there for 20 days. After they leave that facility, they're to go to Health and Human Services. They take care of them then. And in Health and Human Services, they try to place them with their family members here in America, or with an organization that will take them.
I understand there's some homeless organizations in the country that are upset because they are providing the illegal aliens room and board, and the homeless people don't even get that. Here they are, these people just walking across, not even American citizens, and you've got American citizens who are homeless for one reason or another, and they have to fight every single day just to get a place to live and get a meal, and these people just walk across the border and they get a room, they get board, eventually they'll get education, and of course all us taxpayers pay for that. But I just thought that was kind of comical in an ironic kind of a way that homeless organizations are getting upset because, hey, you're giving them room and board, what about us?
Two things very quickly. First of all, this administration paid $86 million for hotels for these people to stay in, for the overflow. $86 million for hotels for them to stay in. Second point I want to make, and it dovetails with what you just said, Butch, and that is, if you want to talk to somebody who gets upset about these illegal aliens who are coming across this border, talk to someone who came to this country the right way and went through the process, and ask them what they think about it. Let me tell you, they'll give you a handful They
I'm
are
sure they
upset
will.
as they can be. Yes, because they did it the right way, and they are proud, and we're proud to have them, and we welcome them. We welcome them.
Right. If you do it the right way, do it lawful, come on in.
Sure. Yeah, we welcome you here.
Bob, anything else for our congressman?
Well, like I said, a couple other topics. They should mention COVID's a big thing. COVID things. More and more people seem to be getting vaccinated. More and more things being opened up. What's your thoughts on how things are going throughout the country on the COVID issue?
Well, thanks. You just brought another thing to my memory, Bob, and that is that Dr. Fauci has not been to the border either. And we've asked him, in fact, a member of our doctor's caucus, Dr. Roger Marshall, who is now a senator from Kansas, he served with us in the House. Dr. Marshall asked Dr. Fauci last week in a hearing, what about the border? What's going on down there? And his response was, well, I haven't been there. I really don't know what's going on. Are you kidding me? That's your responsibility. And you got people coming across who are testing positive. But we are doing much better. But if we don't stop this down at the border, it's only going to get worse, and you're going to have surges. So it's just, what a mess.
Well, again, we appreciate you taking time of your schedule being with us. Are you back home now, or are you back?
I am. I go back tomorrow. I'll be up there Tuesday through Friday of this week. But I slept in my own bed last night, and I'll get to sleep in it tonight, so it is good.
What's going on this week up in Washington, D.C.? Any particular topics other than the border that y'all are working on? Any bills coming up, anything of that sort, Congressman?
Butch, to be quite honest with you, I hadn't looked at the schedule, so
okay.
I don't know exactly.
You've been down there all weekend long? Okay.
Yeah, I've been concentrating on this, and then the Georgia election laws, all the lies and misinformation that's being spread there. It just and then the All-Star game and all these CEOs that are getting together and everything, and we've been preparing a letter for that, and just it's just unbelievable.
But we had the Governor Brian Kemp, on the world-famous Butch and Bob Show last Friday, and he was very informative about the All-Star game being moved and all the situations going on with that issue. He was very informative.
Unbelievable. We have Stacey Abrams and Raphael Warnock and Joe Biden to thank for that.
Sad. Anyway, appreciate you being with us, buddy. Again, safe trip.
Okay.
Safe travels back to Washington, D.C. Thanks again for being with us here on the show.
Thank y'all.
Okay.
All right, bye-bye. All right, Congressman Betty Carter here on the world-famous Butch and Bob Show. Bob, we sure to appreciate that him calling in. We had the Governor, Brian Kemp, on Friday, the Congressman today. We appreciate these guys taking time out of their very busy schedules to be here on the world-famous Butch and Bob Show.
Sounds like a mess at the border.
Man, it does. It really does. Just that crisis situation. Hopefully something can be done about it. Anything else, Bob?
That's it.
All right. Take care.